Having the carburetors removed from the VSTAR is a perfect time to do valve clearance adjustment, and you could see why. If you haven't done this, not doing it at this time is a missed opportunity. There's so much area to work when there are no carbs here. This is the time to do it. There's one, and right over here, here's the other one. So we're going to do a valve clearance adjustment because this bike is due. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be adjusted. It simply needs to be inspected, and if it needs to be adjusted, it will be. Note the specifications in the manual call for a cold engine, and that's how I do this. If you've been riding around all day, wait for tomorrow. I like to keep mine in the middle of these values. That's generally the safe place of operation. We're going to start with the front cylinder, and we need to remove this cam cover. So first we need to remove this piece of chrome here. Now we'll remove this cover, these two bolts right here. And here we have the chain exposed with the marker that we need to do this job. The next two areas to be opened are these two screws here on this embarrassingly dirty chrome. This bike is also going to be cleaned. For this one, I use a large flathead screwdriver. I'll tell you that for this one, I'll show you what I do. I'm sure that they have a tool for it. The problem is that these are dished. They're round on the inside, so I actually use a coin. I realize this is terrible, but this is what fits. It's a quarter and a pair of vice grips. I use a regular screwdriver, which is fine once the tension is broken. We need to have a quick conversation about the next step before we begin. If you're not familiar with this step, I would highly recommend that you get a 22 mil deep well socket that goes on a single extension, and don't do anything like what I'm about to do, because what you don't want is the socket to fall off inside the cavity of this engine as you rotate it. It's worth noting that before rotating your engine, removing the spark plugs will make this a much easier affair. You took my advice and you're using a deep well like you should be. This will just fit in that hole, just clear it, and it goes all the way back to that nut. And we're going to be rotating the engine clockwise, and what we're going to be doing is lining up the dot to the sprocket, or the dot to the marker on the other side on the sprocket, and then we're also going to be lining up this timing mark. We could line up the timing mark twice, but only one time is it going to line up to that dot, so I'll demonstrate this. Whoa. I'm close. I really need two hands to dial this in. Hold on. I'm laying here on the floor and I could see that I've rotated to the dash, but I'm not going to know if I'm in the right position until I go around to the other side. And we could see, in fact, I'm off. I'm going to have to rotate around again. Now I've got it in the right position. Note that the lining up of this dash and this hole is not as critical. It only tells you that you're in the right rotation. The markings below on the bottom of the engine are what's critical to this application. It seems like an appropriate time now to remove the front tappet covers. Remembering that this one carried a bracket. Tap of the plastic object just to break the seal. Then remove it gently. We will clean and inspect that seal. If they're not leaking, I reuse the old seal. Let me get under here and do the bottom one. Should probably put some paper towel down here. The bottom one is going to leak oil. Let's try that again now. Yep, there it goes. Oil everywhere. At least paper towel routed it to the floor. It didn't get on the bike. This will also be cleaned and inspected. We're going to get underway. We're going to start with the intake valve for the front cylinder. And just to show you that you've done everything right up until this point, you should be able to grab this and pull it up and down. You hear a clicking noise because there is some space here now. Now, ideally, I like to be at around 10. The book calls between 7 and 12. And we can see that I'm using the 10 here, right, on millimeter. It's showing 4 up top, and that is not making it. It's tightened a little, right? And if I go with the 7.6, right, the 7.6 slides right in with no problem, which means that 7.6 has got some slack. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and retighten this to get this in 10, which is in the middle position. For this, I'll be using a 12 mil spanner and a 4 millimeter hex right here. If you decide that a valve is going to be adjusted, you could simply loosen the nut. There's nothing special about loosening. You only need to loosen it a little. So I like to pre-stage this. I just have one of the settings out that I want, the one I'm going to use, which is 10. And you want it to be able to go in, but just, it sort of drags, you know, just bites, pulls on it, right? And that's what we're going for. And I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to lay it in there conveniently, right? So it's just laying down. And I'm going to have to put in this Allen key and tighten the nut, ensuring that whatever position this is in, once I set this all up, obviously it's moving right now as I'm talking, I'm going to have to tighten down that nut, ensuring that this doesn't move. And I'm going to have to keep checking, right? Because if I mess it up, I'll just have to keep doing it over and over. And that's not a problem either, right? Because I really should be taking my time, right? So let me see. That's just a sort of provisional, seems okay kind of deal, right? So it's still looking good, right? So I want to make sure this doesn't move. I want to get in deeper in it. Well, that came out nice. If you have a specific gauge like this that goes up in individual increments, go up to the next one, right? The next one should not clear at all, right? So this is 0.005 on the inches, right? And I can't get it in, right? I go back to 0.004, which is 10. And there it goes, nice drag, just like that. Cool, that one's done. And those looking for a specific value here on the lock nut, that's 20 foot-pounds, by the way. So if you're not sure of the exact tension, you can get a torque wrench on there. Before I even continue to the exhaust valve, I'm going to put this cap back on. There's no need to leave it off anymore, and there's no reason to chance getting any contaminants in the engine. I'm just going to clean up this mating surface very quickly. I don't expect it to be real dirty, you know, just give it a once over. Then I clean the top cover, put a little dab of lubricant on the rubber seal. Obviously checking that the rubber seal is in good condition. If not, I would have replaced it, but it's fine and it doesn't leak, so it's okay. I've hand torqued the bolts back on, and I'm going to tighten it to a very light 7 foot-pounds. I think it's safe to pull the paper towel out of the way now. Wipe this off. Get any drips on here. A lot of this is going to burn off when the bike starts. Doesn't matter. What I want to do is take my feeler gauge here. It's set for 15, which is the optimal. And you can see I'm able to, you can hear that, that's good. We're going to stick it in. And that's, yeah, wow. I'm not going to be adjusting that. That's perfect. Nice, it grabs nicely on 15. I know just from experience that based on that, it's not going to work on any other setting. So this is good. We're going to clean it up. We're going to close it. Cleaned up this cover both inside and out, and I'm going to put it back on after I clean up the mating surface. Mating surface is all cleaned up. I'll put the cover back on. These will also be tightened to about 7 foot-pounds. This cover actually contains the ventilation. I'm going to go and clean this up before I put it back on. Clean up this surface too, right quick. This is in good condition, just detail. So now I've got the cam cover back on, tightened down. All pieces returned to the bike are cleaned, including the chrome pieces, which I polished. It's just a policy of mine. I'm going to place this piece back on now. We'll notice as a greater project is completed, by the time it's done, the whole bike is repolished. And with that, the valve adjustment of the front cylinder is complete. Everything is locked down, and we are ready to move on to the rear cylinder. This side doesn't necessarily call for the removing of this cover since there's no breather. I do it as part of a process to keep everything the same, and it gives me an opportunity to clean this while everything is taken apart. So I do it. You don't have to. It does buy you an extra ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch of viewability on the exhaust valve, so something to think about. Now remove the cam cover. rotate the engine to the T-dash position. But this time we're going to be able to see the indicator as we work on it. It's a detent right over here. So that's a lot easier than having to go around the other side. There we go, right on the money, and this is lined up. We're ready to open up the valve covers now for the rear cylinder. So on this valve, 10 fits, if I get it in there, and 12 will not fit. I'm going to say this one is okay, and I'm going to close it and move on to the exhaust valve. Cover's all cleaned up, so is the mating surface. Don't forget to push this heat shield back down in position after working on this valve. Next, we'll remove the cover of the rear exhaust valve. Might find there's even further room to be had by removing this cover. I'll get some paper towel ready beforehand because we know how this is going to go. I have no chance of getting my ratchet in here. I'm going to have to use a hex key to break these open. I also have a mini ratchet that I could have put the bit on. I could have used that too, but it's really not a big deal. It's only 2 of them. They're not that hard to get. It's already loosened. It wasn't too bad. Not as bad as the front one, as far as oil leakage. So I've got my 15, and I got a good slide on 15 here. At least to confirm, I go up one, this is 17, and 17 doesn't fit, right? So this one's good as well. And that's good for me because this one's kind of a pain to do. It's not impossible, but it's the most difficult of all of them. I'm going to clean this up and close it. So now we're going to clean up this cam cover and put it back on. Everything is all cleaned up, ring is lubricated, mating surface is cleaned up too. Rear cam cover is now back on. In keeping with my policy, all chrome is polished before it's put back on the bike. And the rear cylinder is done. Polish up these 2 caps and put them back on the bike. I finished tightening this one with my special tool. At this point, the spark plugs are ready to go back in. You could determine if your spark plugs can go right back in, if they need to be cleaned, if they need to be replaced. Mine have a little blackness to them, probably from all of that garbage that I ran in the gas tank before when I tried to see if it would run without having to actually clean the carburetors. That's all good. I'm going to put them in, and if they don't clean up after riding for about 30-40 miles, I'll just replace them. So let's put them in now. Also, most people know this. You never actually use a wrench to put the spark plugs in. That's a good way to cross thread. This one is very deep, so I just use the extension for holding onto the spark plug just to get my fingers around it, but I'm not actually using any ratchet end. Once it's in, just a light snug is sufficient. That's all it needs. It's good. Don't strip it out. And more often than not, you'll end up pulling out this socket with a pair of needle nose pliers. Happens all the time. It's my day. Yeah, this front one is not a terribly convenient spark plug access. This is true. There we go, it's done. Spark plug, there's like 1,000,000 miles to work. It's very easy. One last note before I finish this project. When doing this project, right here at the end is an opportune time to clean and polish these oil lines. You're never going to get a better opportunity to come in and clean these. Nice and clean and shiny. Any corrosion or whatnot removed. And that's it. This project on adjusting the valves on a VSTAR 1100 is finished. I hope you found it useful and enjoyable. Thanks for watching.